Welcome to the Connection Podcast. I am Lauren Dry, also known as the Connection Catalyst. Connection and this podcast for me is personal. As a driven professional, I found myself an expert in all things work and business, but it was at home that I really needed clarity and ease. After finally finding it one marriage breakdown and one marriage reset later, and finally discovering what really works to have connection in modern relationships, using science, simplicity and soul, our signature program, Rise into Regulation, was born. That's giving so many others in modern, driven relationships back clarity and ease for good. On the podcast today, we're going to dive deep together on all things relationships, business, identity, and leadership. And clarity and ease is at the heart of it all. And we are so happy to be with you so that you can have what you need in connection, mind, body, and soul too. Hello again, and welcome back to the Connection Podcast. On today's episode, we have a extremely special guest, someone very, very close to my heart. I am welcoming on the podcast today, Lieve De Lint. Lieve is a certified neuropsychologist with a background in internal family systems. She's also my dear friend and one of the experts on the team at Rise into Regulation. So it is a very special introduction that I'm bringing to you today on the Connection Podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Lieve De Lint. Oh, we have some stories to tell you about the pronunciation of that. Yeah. The patience that Lieve has had with me with getting that one out. Today on the podcast, what we are covering is co-parenting in chaos and also exploring the very first pillar inside of Rise. In a previous episode, we have covered the second pillar inside of Rise, which is body, and the first pillar is mind. And it's something that you and I have gone over in detail, and it's one of the most important structures in the first pillar inside of Rise, which is simplicity around communication, simplicity around understanding ourselves, and having the clarity within ourselves and within the dynamics around us so that resentment doesn't rule our body and rule our relationships. But something that we're going to go into a little bit more in detail today is chaos in co-parenting. And I would love to hear from you. Why is this topic so important to you? And why do you think that this is the episode that the audience is going to really love and really going to get so much value out of if they are in a season where there is chaos in their co-parenting journey?
Yes. I think we have so many methods to escape when there's difficulty in general. Whether it's in a relationship, then you're out of a relationship. And that often happens when people go through divorce and become co-parents, that there is a moment of perhaps relief of like, okay, at least we don't have those dynamics anymore. And then you can find yourself in the same dynamics, but just as co-parents. For couples that don't have kids that separate, they find it in other ways, right? We find our patterns back until we break them. So it's just an example going back into a pattern if we haven't done our inner work, that we can still be in chaos as co-parents. So when we find, just you find your lessons back.
I think when we are stuck in a messy middle as well, and one of the biggest questions that kept me stuck and up at night in the middle of when my marriage was falling apart was, do I stay or do I go? And I tell you right now, that fantasy that I was looking at on the horizon of, let's just separate. This will all be behind me. Everything will be amazing. I can start fresh. We're not compatible. This is all like chaos. We can co-parent as friends. This is going to be great. Yeah. All of the problems that we have now will disappear off into the horizon, never to be seen again if we separate. And I think that you can speak so beautifully into this and I don't want to start the episode off on, oh gosh, your problems will follow you around no matter what, whether you stay married or you separate. But I think it is an important dynamic to explore around our own inner work and how we can have structure and simplicity back in our own bodies and our own systems so that irrelevant of whether we stay or go, that if you do have young children and if you do have shared dynamics, shared friends, shared family members, if you don't have kids and you still are in that do I stay or go dance, it's important to reflect on the patterns that we carry through to the rest of our lives, whether we do stay or go. And sometimes some challenges, especially if you are co-parenting, no matter what, those dynamics are going to follow you around. Yeah. And so we really want to explore freedom from that, not just coping. And I'd love to hear a little bit from you about, first of all, introducing you to the audience, if they haven't met you yet, if they're not already inside of Rise and have a wonderful relationship with you already. I'd love to hear a little bit more about
how you found this work, what your personal journey was around this, and how you came to explore chaos in co-parenting.
So I studied psychology, and what I was very much missing was the connection to the body. So I worked in HR in between. I traveled the world, and when I was 30, I went back into coaching, but somatic coaching, and living in California for 9 years, built a family with 3 kids, and ended up being in a marriage where there was a lot of disconnect, a lot of dysfunctional communication from both sides, and just it was completely falling apart. So I have sat in the chairs like many other couples that also come to Rise in the couples therapy. I've loved every therapy because I also have the professional hat on that I'm just very always intrigued by relationship dynamics, my patterns, whether it's internal and external. However, I could also see it was just not working. Something was missing. A lot was missing, but one of the things that was missing was, again, like, yes, we are talking about what we need to do. We are very aware, but that doesn't mean you're embodied. And it doesn't mean that you are in a calm place within your nervous system, that the triggers, when they come up, that you can have a moment extra, a breath extra, what we're also working on with our clients to break a pattern. So I remember vividly thinking of, is there a program out there that really integrates way more nervous system work? And it wasn't. I haven't found it then. And okay, I went through the divorce, separated now for a couple of years, divorced for more than a year. And certain patterns will stay. And it is the relationship, whether you're in the marriage or you're out of the marriage, it's, if it works well after, that's the cherry on the cake. The whole cake is within.
Yeah.
And you're gonna get the lessons until you have learned them. And it can continue. It can continue in a different way. And sometimes it can get better after you divorce because you have more time actually by yourself. I have a lot of respect for people doing this work in relationship because there's a lot of influence of the other while you're also trying to reset yourself in a different way, right? It takes a lot to even focus on yourself. But in my case, yes, the certain chaos, the certain dynamics, certain conflicts and ways of communication continue, not on a daily basis. So there is a lot of blessings, I'm sure, for both of us, but they continue, and they will continue until the kids are at least 18 years old.
Oh, yeah.
So that chaos, it's also a beautiful mirror because every time there is that disconnect, what happens in my body? What happens in my mind? How much am I focusing on what is happening versus what I can do in the moment? So it's a way you can grab it as a lesson and transmute what's happening and move forward. And it's a very interesting way to just keep working on yourself. I'm not saying I would choose it. Not in how we are often doing it, but it just means for me that there are more lessons to learn.
Yeah.
I want to give that definition to it because then I am grabbing some power back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that speaks into probably why I could comfortably say the majority of clients do come to Rise, not just to feel better in their relationship, not just to break their own hidden patterns. Why do I end up with the same type of person? Why do we have these chronic fighting cycles that just never seem to end? But most importantly, because the people that come to Rise have so much love for their children and they have awareness that there are blind spots, there are challenges that no matter how hard they work at it, these same cycles just seem to never end. And one of the greatest pain points is trying to co-parent, whether you're together or not, from a place of feeling like you're both a team. And as a mother, I will tell you that there is nothing more distressing than being in a situation where you can logically understand that your co-parent is trying their best, but being in a situation where you feel rightly or wrongly, rightly or wrongly, that your co-parent is not parenting in alignment with your values, and that maybe you feel like you can't say anything because then the co-parent will feel judged, or if you don't say anything, then you're leaving your children to be, inheriting broken patterns, Or there's a lot of resentment and frustration that one parent has one parenting style, another parent has the other, or even around tone. We feel judged. It's scary. It's alarming. It's incredibly shame-inducing when you do feel as though you're parenting from a place that's not in alignment even with your own values, and it's pointed out by the person closest to you.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't think as a parent there's anything that can feel more jarring, hurtful, and it can induce a shame spiral more. And as we've covered before on the podcast, there is probably the single most corrosive factor in relationship is not actually dysfunction, it's shame. Each person feeling such a disconnect and a lack of safety with shame, that resentment defensive cycle and that spiral just continues and continues and continues. So I'd love to speak a little bit into that around maybe your experience and that you've seen maybe anonymously with one of our past clients that's really touched you that you think is really universal around perhaps one of the clients that we've been working with and how common that dynamic really can be around shame and how difficult it can be just using, let's say, traditional psychological methods alone without those second two pillars. But also inside of RISE, we do use structure and simplicity around communication, but it is very much about empowering you to use communication tools that your body honors as opposed to shame-based, perhaps, where we're told the right thing to do and say, but it just doesn't feel accessible, or our body feels a sense of rejection of those tools when we do feel threatened, when we do feel overwhelmed. So I'm just wondering if there's an example that really stands out to you the most around chaos in co-parenting.
We recently had a client on board, and one of her challenges was feeling like a team within the communication. And I could very much relate to that and share some personal experiences within our sessions. I think all clients that we have within RISE come on board knowing very well what the other person should do in the relationship, in their parenting. And I definitely was one of those people in the marriage. I have definitely sometimes,
Especially as a psychologist.
I've written ebooks to my ex-husband. Definitely not appreciated. And I understand I did not work.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. Like, that is just very much overstepping from a very good place of trying to steer something the other direction. But that was not my place. And that didn't create more safety at all. So I've been there multiple times. And when you then go out and you morph into co-parents, you have to first really know your boundaries are shown to you because you're physically not there half the time. So you cannot always overshadow the other if you would even want to. And then there is the communication part where you're still hoping to be a team. But if you've gone through a pretty rough separation where communication was very dysfunctional, it's probably not going to get better if not both parties are willing to look at the problem instead of the person. And that is a very common pattern that we see within relationship dynamics and also within co-parent dynamics, that if there's a problem and that problem is being communicated, are you going to direct that and create a personal attack? Or are you going to remember that you're still two people who love their children? And are you going to create that problem and put the problem on the other side of the table? And besides mentioning that, like, okay, let's focus on the issue and not on each other, the next step is really boundary setting, not just in the actual conversation, which can be accepted by the other person or just not, but also energetically. And that's something, one of the pillars within RISE too, we have a huge pillar of somatics. How can you reset your nervous system? How can you tap in? And that is something that, especially co-parents in chaos, as a co-parent, it can sometimes feel very, very, not hopeless. That's not the word I'm looking for. You need to surrender a lot. You are not always there. And that goes from both sides. We both have very different ways of parenting and ways of thinking about the world and human beings. So that goes vice versa. You really need to know, this is what I can control. This is what is important in my home, in my body. This is what I want to fall asleep with at night. And this is what I'm going to put aside for tomorrow. So setting these clear boundaries as well external as internal, next to learning how to regulate your nervous system, have a few safe people you can talk to without making it. I don't want to make things into a pity party, yet I do want to allow myself to have moments where I just scream or cry. But I don't want to keep hanging in it. I won't.
Exactly.
Absolutely not. So those boundaries will get clearer and clearer.
Yeah.
And that is the beauty of what you then at one point can give to your children.
Yeah.
When the time is there.
What was a moment in time that you felt that you realized that perhaps you were relying on logic alone and trying to lawyer up, so to speak, and convince the other person of their faults and flaws, maybe to keep the co-parenting relationship going? Was there a point in time where you realized that logic alone, without the simplicity, without the anchor in the somatics and the soul, those two other pillars for us, that was leading you further away from your goals as opposed to closer?
Oh, if I just would scroll through the messages and my part of the messages would be like, again, ebooks, it's like, okay, I'm going into that old pattern of trying to explain my view, having space for his view, and realizing and remembering this beautiful phrase of that when someone wants to understand you, they will, even if they speak a different language. And we have been in a place where we have just been very triggered by each other. And nobody hears you. I cannot hear someone when I'm feeling very triggered. So my words, no matter how perfect they could be, they're not. I'm not claiming they're perfect. But
we aim for it.
I'm pretty proud with where I've come from and where I'm now with all the faults I have. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're both willing to see the problem before the annoyance of the other person, then you're going to win in many, many steps. But if you are still in such amount of pain or anger or rage, it's an uphill battle. And there's no point to that. There's no point to that. Yeah. So even just looking at how much are you still in the mind, in your logic, when you look at how you explain what's happening to a friend. What does your chat look like? You can see how much you are in here.
So I'm wondering what you would say to that person who's probably just at the start of their journey, maybe recognizing that they do send those really, really long messages and that they do lawyer up, so to speak, when they are trying to, and it's about our kids, it's about our babies. It's really important. I feel like the first time I explored this idea and someone said to me, oh, well, you can't just use logic. You can't just point out to the other person what's going wrong. I'm like, they're my babies. Why wouldn't I? He's clearly wrong. He just needs to be told the right way. I found that consideration very threatening. I thought it didn't make sense. I thought, I'm not the problem. He just needs to see. He just needs to get it right because there's nothing more important than our babies. And if I just come up with the exact right argument, then it'll make sense because common sense, right? There should be common sense and you should just get it. So if you were speaking to me right at the start of my journey and I'm still in that place of, no, this is not about my regulation. This is not about my hidden patterns. What are you talking about? He just needs to stop being a jerk because this matters. This is about my babies. How would you talk to me? How would you allow me to understand the difference between having simple, secure communication in that first pillar around mind versus maybe the old school way? Maybe what we're taught in therapy is just find that logical key. A lot of traditional therapy methods, find that simple logical key, explain it better, and then everyone will be happy. You can be happy families again.
Yeah. So I would invite them to mention this phrase you just said again. Okay, he just needs to see it. He just needs to understand. And then I would ask him, okay, where do you feel that in your body? Even if I say that, because I know what that feels like, that energy is here, it's stuck here, and it's up here.
Yeah.
He needs to see it. So it's an energy, your energy is almost like it's crampy and it's going to reach out.
Almost feels like a vomit. Like it comes up the back of my chest here. I'm like, ooh.
Yes. Yeah, because we are in this moment living through that person who needs to do something that would make us and in our minds, our kids feel safe, right?
Yes.
So that already means like you're out of your circle of control. You are trying to still narrate and tell someone else how to live their lives.
Yeah.
So first invite the clients back to go back into our bodies. Like, what is my truth? What can I do in this moment? So for me, like, what is my truth? Which battles am I willing to go into and which not? When it's regarding safety. And then I will write ebooks. I just did hasty, the whole thing. Then emotional safety. I will write ebooks on that. I will stand for that, even whether the other person will want to hear it or not. And again, multiple people will have multiple opinions on that. And then also, what are battles are not mine. Trust that the rest is
Grey rock.
So really go back into what is my truth. What can I control right now? And what you can control as a co-parent is not so much. It's not. It's your time with your babies and trying to communicate when you really feel it's needed.
How would you begin to introduce to someone, whether they are in the marriage or in already a co-parenting relationship, how would you begin to introduce to someone having simplicity and creating a sense of safety for everyone, especially the kids, when in the past, up until now, chaos has been the overruling factor in co-parenting, and you're seeking to create some common understandings and common frameworks that you both can consistently meet without the drama anymore? How would you first start introducing that to someone who really only has at their disposal the ebooks, the long text messages? How would you begin to shift their mindset from, okay, this is the only way to solve things, into something a little bit simpler, a little bit more effective?
I would really, really take 10 steps back. And every time there would be a thought of he needs to do or she needs to do A or B, go back to, am I doing what I want to do? So first, really create your own book of values, your own book of behaviors, your own safety within your home, your set of rules, your non-negotiables, just to make sure that that person has that set, is really living in themselves, in their body, and not are still almost in the relationship, in their minds, trying to control the other person to get the safety. So if that's out of the way and you're very clear on how do you want things in your home, how do you want communication to go, what to do when it doesn't go how you want it to go, which happens a lot too, especially with the chaos and the kids going back and forth, then how to create that framework with the other person. It is also taking 10 steps back and not living in any fairy tale land or in dreams of how you wish to co-parent and wish to communicate, really looking at the facts. How have you thus been able to communicate together, and how have you been able to problem solve? I have been living in fairy tale land because I still thought if I do X, we would just understand both views. Can there be space for both views? But sometimes I would have a very strong view, or he would have a very strong view, and we did not have capacity and the willingness to just be like, you know what, we are very different, but I care about your opinion and mine, and let's find a way. That was not much there. And be realistic, and really start very simple. So when you're already co-parents, hopefully you had a really good mediator. If you skip a mediator and you go to court, the more details you can have in the agreements, the better. The more you can put on paper in times where both of you are willing to look at that, the better, because then you have something to fall back on. Hopefully you can also just co-parent fluidly, and you don't need to always be like, well, this is what we agreed, because that is not, ideally, that's no one's ideal, but at least have those basic down and then work up from there.
Yeah. And if you haven't listened to this already, we go about creating really simple agreements and frameworks that you can rest on during a regulated state, whether you are co-parenting together or co-parenting outside of a marriage. And we cover this in a couple of places, the values episode, as well as the holiday episode, navigating the holidays. I'll put both links in the show notes, just if you want to start practicing these frameworks to get back to a little bit of simplicity. But I'm wondering, have you had any recent revelations, transformations? I'd really love to talk to you a little bit. You know where I'm going to go with this. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about your experience and your journey around the grey rock theory.
I really don't like to be a gray rock. However,
I want to sit with that. I really don't want to be a grey rock. Now, this is just a fun phrase that we've been throwing around, but I want to sit with that for a minute. You first heard the phrase around being a grey rock, and your body said what?
yeah, at the beginning, and I've heard about it.
I want to take you on the journey
Yes.
from when you first
My body would say I was still living in the US when I learned about gray rock.
Let's talk a little bit about the grey rock theory first. What do you understand the grey rock theory to be now?
Yeah. The gray rock theory is having the capacity to see a pattern that won't be changing no matter what you say or what you do. And the gray rock comes in by recognizing that normally you want to lawyer up, you want to explain, you want to try to make the other person see something or explain something. And the best way of being a gray rock is being like, okay. It is almost like the gray rock pulls their energy back. And
so the way that I visualize it is that imagine you go up to a rock and you start yelling at it.
Yeah.
Is the grey rock going to yell back? Is it going to transform into something new? Is it going to get damaged? Is the grey rock going to get damaged by somebody yelling at it?
No, the grey rock is just a grey rock.
But it's still safe, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about if somebody comes up and says, "Oh, you're the prettiest grey rock in the world. You're so amazing. Oh, the sunshine comes straight from your little tiny pebbles." Again, does the grey rock change?
No, it doesn't.
No, but it's still a wonderful grey rock. There's no less than that.
Yeah.
But I think that that's a really beautiful vision for someone who perhaps is living in a very reactive state, unintentionally, of course. But I think it's a really beautiful picture to paint around what you're aiming for when you are in a high conflict situation or high chaos situation, around how when we lean in and we try to convince the other person, and this doesn't mean that you shouldn't tell them what to do. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have values and boundaries. Like the grey rock is still, you can't get past the grey rock.
Yeah.
You can't move it out of the way. The rock is the rock. It's still not moving.
Yeah.
It's just not joining in the chaos.
It's the gray rock is not joining the pattern. The gray rock is going to stay there. I really love the castle analogy. There is a lot of liveliness and heart and warmth within a castle's walls, but the walls are important. If someone is meeting your level 1 communication values, if you are meeting someone that has the same willingness to communicate respectfully and in a way that serves you, the castle door can go open. If not, the castle door is up, and that is okay. And whether it's gray rock or the castle analogy, the first time I heard about it, it felt impossible. Why? Because my nervous system was still so dysregulated. That meant that everything had to stay inside. But when you're so used to trying to either please everyone, keep things calm, argue, discuss, trying to change the environment, control the environment in a way that would make me feel safe. If you suddenly come with the gray rock method, it's like, yeah, but what am I going to do with what is there inside? Because in the castle walls, there's still a lot of stuff going on. And that's where the nervous system work comes in. How can you go from trying to control externally to trying to calm and regulate internally? And then you just see the pattern. You see that they're trying to throw fire over the walls, hoping that you're going to react and just go back into
let all of the gates down, and then suddenly it's a siege.
It's a siege, and nobody is listening to each other. It's just people want to actually calm their nervous systems by focusing on the other in sometimes very dysfunctional ways. And am I going to join that? It's the same with couples, right? Or friendships or work relationships. In RISE, the question is, are you ready to have a discussion? Are you two selves in the room? Did you bring your high self in the room? And did you bring your high self in the room? Are you still curious towards each other? Are you feeling neutral? Or are you just two dysfunctional patterns that you join the room? Are you taken over by a part of you, your anger and your fear of abandonment? Like, who are you in the room?
Exactly. Who are you irrelevant of the chaos around you? That's what gives you security and the ability to problem solve. But the person who gets the effectiveness out of the conversation the most. And I think that that's really important. And I've watched you model that again and again and again in your own journey about how irrelevant of what the other person is doing, you have safety for yourself and for your children.
Yes. And the gray rock, I do want to add, and you've witnessed me for a few for a few years. I've had some beautiful moments where I've used it because it was not even about the other person anymore. It was remembering, like, how do I want to live? What type of communication do I want? What type of people do I want around me? And I don't care how close or far you are, if you're family or not. Certain dynamics and certain patterns that continue to be the same, that's not what I'm going to choose for my life.
Yeah.
That come from a very calm space. And certain times when I made those decisions, it was just very natural. And it was a very, very neutral, okay, I see this pattern, I see it again, and I am not choosing this. And there's no emotions involved with certain decisions. With others, there is. It's not always easy. You've seen me in all the colors, but there's no emotions involved. It's more like, I see what you're doing. I would normally defend myself, attack back, or try to explain my point of view. No, I want peace. One of my biggest wishes and things I'm cultivating in my life on a daily basis is peace. So am I going to choose peace, which is a gray rock?
And also for your children, element of that is safety as well. Yeah. That's not a peace. Doesn't mean abandoning yourself and just rolling over. No, it's having the simplicity to be able to see the solution at the root without the chaos. Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
So it's finding peace, and it's also knowing what's the capacity, what's my capacity, what's their capacity to understand, and what is their willingness, what's my willingness to go forward in this, and then you can quickly just assess that. And it's a muscle. It's a muscle. And the more you do it, the more you realize that you are creating your life in many ways. And you choose if you're going to jump on someone else's way of living, or if you're going to go back to, no, this is what I choose for myself.
I love that. And I love how you've become such a model for everyone that we're supporting around what it really looks like to have that. Maybe if even there was a season in your life in the past where maybe you didn't have that peace, where you didn't have that clarity, where you didn't have that ease and that simplicity, even if there was chaos going on around you, and watching you provide that in your family and be a model for that is just such a thing of beauty and such a gift that you give to everyone that you connect with inside and outside of Rise. So it's such a blessing to share this space and to be able to introduce you, your journey and your work to the listeners here on the Connection podcast, but also everyone inside of Rise. And I'd love to hear from the audience any questions you might have for Lieve, if you want to pop them in the comments so that we can take this conversation a little bit deeper. If you are having specifically challenges around co-parenting, either inside the marriage or outside of the marriage, and you are looking to have more support around that simplicity and that peace, because that's really what we want. It's what we want to pass on to our kids as well. And I'd love to ask you, if you had to leave someone who's listening to this episode right now an element of hope, an element of transformation, an element of learning that they can take away with them to explore, not only based on the episodes that we'll share in the show notes here, but based on your own personal transformation. What is a moment in time, or what is a lesson that you've taken from exploring that peace and finding that simplicity in even the most chaotic of environments and situations? What would you share with someone who's going through that right now and is in the messy middle?
I'm speaking to quite some women in the messy middle, not just professionally, but also personally. The very messy middle, when nothing is clear yet, there are a few threats. First, most people that are going through these breaks, they have lost at least one part of themselves. And they have sometimes no idea who they are anymore because they gave themselves to the family. And that's where you're supposed to be. That's okay. Like, step by step. Messy middle doesn't mean you have to have clarity on who you are and who you want to become. And that's something that often we want to rush. When you're in the messy middle, we also want to rush this feeling of wanting to have hope and have belief that there can be brightness and love and beauty on the other side. And what I'm saying to these women time and time again is, that's not up to you. Because I know what it's like to be absolute rock bottom and you don't feel any of it. And you see people laughing on the street and you see people kissing and you think that's not possible. How is that possible? We live on the same planet and they are experiencing a completely different life. So what I did when I was absolute rock bottom, and bless the people, the close people around me, I had 2 or 3 people that I could go to or see, or I could call more, but that would just remind me that there's hope, even though I didn't feel it. So choose a few people, whether online or you know them personally, that tell you there is another side and it's going to be so beautiful. And you won't feel any of that. So that's the thing, except you won't feel it. So that's a logical, rational decision of I trust these people, or they are where I would like to be. And I'm going to believe that that's possible, even though my body is probably not feeling that, because messy middle also means that your body is exhausted. It's in a turmoil. So accept where you are, even though you want to run away from that place as far as possible, because that's the worst place to be. It is the worst place to be. And find your hope. Logically, rationally, choose your hope, and just remind yourself sometimes that it's there and you cannot speed it up. Go through the day-to-day process. Take one step at a time.
I love that.
Absolute one step at a time. And the sun will shine at one point and it will be completely different. And often it's a restructuring of your nervous system, your values, remembering more. I could say actually more of a remembering that you've lost a long time ago. Yeah. So choose the hope and accept that you're not going to always feel it in that moment. And you are where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. And I feel like that links so beautifully with another recent episode all about faith. No matter what that faith looks like for you, you know, find your safe place to land. If that's faith in God and you feel like that you have that safety and that ability to access that co-regulation with something outside of yourself, and the trust that there is purpose in this, and that the cliche is that you'll look back one day, it'll all make sense. No one wants to hear that in the messy middle. No one wants to hear that.
Yeah.
But what we can do instead is just find that trust and that faith that if we let go just a little bit, just hold our challenges with a little bit more lightness and find a safe place to land, we will be held.
Yes. We will be held, and we are already literally held. We're on the earth, you know, and it's really, it's again, pulling back to what you can control. It's often where, you know, it's every time going back to what's your circle of control. And sometimes there are days you don't want to get out of bed, but okay, go get a tea. Yeah. And then your mind's going to be like, yeah, but I need to do this and I need to do that. And my kids and then all the scenarios, like, okay, I'm in my head right now. No, I don't need to carry everything.
Yeah.
It's very natural, but I don't need to figure all of that out because we cannot. We cannot. There is way more going on besides this little head of ours, you know? So trust that whatever is happening is happening. You might like it or not.
Yeah.
Go back to what you need to do. What do you need to do in that moment? And what can you do? And take a step at a time. It is a huge, huge shock for our nervous system when we go through humongous breaks. Like, it can be absolutely horrendous. And many people I know are in it for years. In that messy middle for years because the divorce drags on or there's conflict. And what we also tend to do is think, oh, but when that's done, I will have some relief. And partly it's probably true, but you can find relief right here.
Yes.
And the first step to relief is accepting that right now you feel shit. Because we often try to get ourselves towards the release, you know?
Absolutely.
But you need to land first. You know what? I feel shit and I need to feel shit right now. And that's okay. That's where actually at one point the relief will come from. And we try to outsmart ourselves and others, and then we crash.
Yeah. That's such a beautiful message of acceptance, but also love. A love for the journey.
Yeah.
Thank you. I feel like there's someone who's listening right now who is gaining a lot of comfort from that and from your journey. Something that we do on the Connection podcast is we ask a question that has been left by a previous guest, and the previous guest didn't know who the next guest was going to be. So they have left a question for you.
Okay.
And that question is, if ignorance is bliss, why do we seek knowledge?
So I think within relationships, when we're in chaos, which we've been talking about this hour, once we start seeking knowledge, we're probably out of the bliss. So I don't think ignorance is bliss, because it's often doesn't continue when we get into the chaos of relationships. And I'm linking that statement to what we have been talking about. But the seeking of knowledge can be as a way to understand better and to cultivate our wisdom more, or it can be in order to control more and to get ourselves back into the bliss states that we once had within relationships. So it really depends on what is the motivation behind the seeking the knowledge part. Because sometimes the knowledge can take over and try to, again, lawyer up of how life should be. And that's often already when we missed the part of where we're in the bliss. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. All right. Well, I would like to ask you, Lieve, what question would you like to leave for the next guest, not knowing who they're going to be, so that they can dive into that when they're on the Connection podcast next?
If someone else's shadow can be your biggest teacher, what would it teach you?
I love that. And Lieve, if someone else's shadow could be your biggest teacher, what would it teach you?
Oh, no. I gave it to someone else. I mean, my biggest teachers were definitely not only the most positive ones, right? So someone else's shadows have taught me and are still teaching me how to have a beautiful castle, and how and when to have the drawbridge open and when closed.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
That's
that
really
was beautiful. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Lieve. I feel like there are a million little threads we could pull here, and I can't wait to unravel some more of them in future episodes. So if something really stood out to you in this episode and you'd like to dive a little bit deeper, please comment here. Please come and let me know over on Instagram at Lauren_dry. And Lieve, where can our listeners find you to follow along on your journey? Obviously, as well as on Instagram at Lauren_dry and Inside of Rise. But where else can our loving audience find you?
Yes, that can be on Instagram. It's at Lieve, LIEVE.de.LINT.
And we'll put that in the show notes for you as well. All right, I hope that this has really met you where you needed to be met today. And if this has resonated for you, please follow along, share this episode with someone who you feel may need to hear it today if you think it will offer them comfort and ease. And also, if it has brought something up that you want to dive deeper into about, please come and join me over on Instagram. I'd love to chat with you and unpack it, send you some resources and give you the support that you need right now. But most importantly, thank you for being here on this journey towards clarity and ease on the Connection podcast. Big love.